The 5-day round trip began at the Fort Rouge complex outside Detroit. Moving through the Rouge River to the Detroit River, the Benson headed north through Lake St. Clair and the St. Clair River. She steamed the full length of Lake Huron and then made her way through the St. Mary's River and the Sioux Locks. She sailed halfway across Lake Superior to the port of Marquette. And once loaded with ore, she retraced.
You say black bottom, where does that term originated from?
Okay,
Why
so there's a debate about it, but most people have come to the conclusion that it comes from the soil. The Savoyard River ran through the middle of the lower east side of Detroit. The Savoyard River was drained and they built a railroad in there, the Grand Trunk Railroad. Today, that's the DeQuinder Cut. So the DeQuinder Cut was the Grand Trunk Railroad. Prior to that was the Savoyard River. So the Savoyard River was a tributary of the Detroit River, and all the dirt around it, all the soil around it was very, very dark and full of minerals. And so people, was farming and all that kind of stuff in there. And they named that black bottom after the dirt.
Okay.
But it became associated with the people as time went on. Because
too, that white people did
right.
Black bottom.
So it became associated with the black community because at some point, this is the only area, for the most part, that black people were allowed to live.
Exactly.
Obion is French, Shane is French, Randolph is actually French. So most of these streets that run into the river are French. And these streets were farms called ribbon farms. And the streets, they were long, thin strip farms that ran. They weren't big like a plantation, wide, rectangular like a plantation, but they were long and thin and ran straight to the river so that you could transport the goods that you were growing onto ships for trading and selling. So you get it right up, you just pack it on to the ships, and the ships would go out and you sell that way. And these ribbon farm owners, many of them were slave owners, not Brush. Although Brush was a slave owner for a short
trader makes his way up the Moroni River, aided by friendly natives. His object? To trade small manufactured goods with the primitive Indians along its banks for their spears, baskets, and primitive artifacts. His expedition must cut its way through the dense jungle overgrowth and often has to eat only what nature provides. And now, here's the man you saw in the film earlier, Mr. Herman Jessen. Proud to have you with us, Mr. Jessen.
Thank you, John.
I'd like to ask, first of all, sir, how remote are these Indians from civilization?
These Indians live about 250 miles up the Moroni River. It's very hard to get up there because the rains endanger any trip, and the river is either too low or too high. It's just in July that one can penetrate into those villages.
Oh, is this your first trip into this area?
No, into this area it's my second trip, but I've made 25 trips into South America so far, and I expect to leave very shortly on another one.
Well, where are you from originally?
I was born in Europe, but now I am engaged in the import-export business, and I spend about half of my time down in the Amazon jungles and the other half of my time here in Los Angeles.
Well, we're all anxious to see what being an Amazon trader really means, so let's start now.
We start in the town of Saint-Laurent-du-Maroni in French Guiana on the Moroni River. This river divides Dutch Guiana from French Guiana, and the native quarters house these beautiful canoes in which the natives use. Two of the men who made this trip with me, my companions, on a long journey trading with the natives of this region. The things that I used for trading with these people are mirrors, fish hooks, beads, flashlights, also tobacco and salt and sugar that the natives can use. I'm trading a knife for a comb and a basket for beads. Our boat was 50 foot long and 4 feet wide, and there were 4 of us going on this long trip up the Moroni River. We are leaving the town and passing by the native quarters, and we are on our way to Mukumak Mountains and trading with the natives of the region.
How long a river trip will this be, Mr. Jessen?
It's about 2 months trip, John.
And how long will it be in terms of miles?
It's about 500 miles each way. We are getting our guns ready as we are living off the land. You'll see that later. This little boy is one of the sons of the Bushmen, and I gave him a piece of chewing gum, and that's what he did with it. He couldn't figure it out. To pole our way into this native bony Bushman village. This is the harbor, and here are some of the typical canoes, tutu presenting.
The first men to perceive and define the river called it Mahitchiktuk, and to them the river was seen as a living power. These people of the river journeyed from the west some 6,000 years ago, and there is a legend that their god told them to journey eastward till they reached a river that flowed both ways, and that this would be a fertile land where their people would prosper.
There are no Indians living along the river now, but there was a time when there were many villages along its banks.
So, this is Canada. We all know that Canadians like to pretend they're further north than Americans are, but they're really not, and I'm going to prove it to you. This is the 49th parallel, the longest border between two countries anywhere in the world, and the one that's most often thought of as being the dividing line between Canada and America. It's true that most Americans do, in fact, live south of this line, but so do most Canadians. In fact, roughly 70% of all Canadians live south of the 49th in this land shaded red, but we can go even lower. A full 50% of all Canadians live south of this line in this relatively tiny area shaded red. This means that most Canadians live further south than pretty much the entire US states of Washington, Montana, North Dakota, and obviously Alaska too. But I'm not done embarrassing Canada just yet. This is the southernmost point of Canada on Middle Island in Lake Erie. Zooming out to view more of the North American continent, would it surprise you if I told you that there are, in fact, more Americans who live north of this island than Canadians? Well, it shouldn't, because there are, and this is how. Here's the line of latitude drawn precisely over Middle Island's southernmost location. Clearly, all of Canada exists above this line, but a surprising amount of the United States does as well, including this tiny sliver of California. If you're from California, you can legitimately claim that some of your state goes further north than Canada's southernmost point does. With the line this far south, though, a lot of America's largest urban areas exist above Canada's southernmost point, like the entirety of Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Alaska, and most of Wyoming, Michigan, New York State, and Massachusetts. Added up together, this means that more Americans live north of Canada's southernmost point than Canadians do.